There's a big field of cars in the Retro Rallycross Championship at Lidenhill in Kent this weekend, ranging from Ford RS 200s to Minis, from Metro 6R4s to Volkswagen Beetles. All manner of machinery on display, with James Harrold topping the points at the end of qualifying ahead of Roger Thomas and Steve Cousins. Beetle, 6R4 and Citroën AX. Real variety. Such is the size of the entry this weekend. Semi-finals. The first is on the grid. James Harrold, Steve Cousins and Jason Bowes share row 1 ahead of Paul Easterbrook and Ian Biaggi, the Retro Championship leader. Then it's Ray Morgan and Chris Dawkins with the Peugeot 309 at the back. 4 laps of action underway. James Harrold blasts off the line. So does Ray Morgan in the rear-wheel drive Mark III Escort. Gets up the inside line. Can't get ahead of Paul Easterbrook's quick-starting Toyota MR2. But he does get alongside Jason Bowes in the Mark I Golf. A little bit slow off the line, that car. But then as they power through Chessons, he starts to accelerate clear, and Ray Morgan's got a problem because in the background there is the Escort. Look, it's off the road. Ray Morgan at his home circuit, sadly, looks like he's a retirement, and that's the day done for him. So James Harrold leads the way. 4 podium finishes already this year. He's taken a win, and he's also the Super Retro Rallycross Championship leader. Steve Cousins going a little bit wide in the Citroën AX, the ex-Dan Rook car. Dan won the Super National Championship with that back in 2015. Steve Cousins has been racing it this season and getting ever quicker in it. Jason Bowes in the family Mark I Golf flicks through the chicane in 3rd place. Across the loose at Chestnut Drift they come. James Harrold in the Beetle leads the way. Very wide indeed goes Steve Cousins as he applies the power and tries to haul the car through ahead of the Golf. Back onto the tarmac. Steve Cousins very busy trying to defend now, and right there behind him is Jason Bowes. Up the hill once more, head to the hairpin, hit the brakes, turn through that right-hander. The cars drop downhill now towards paddock as Ray Morgan ponders what it is that stopped the Escort in its tracks. The Mark I Golf running 3rd then as they come onto the loose at Chessons. Jason Bowes racing this car that was built and driven by his late brother Jordan. And Jason upholding family honour and desperately keen to try to get himself through into the final and go as well as he possibly can in the main race of the day. But even though the Golf is 3rd, Volkswagen still leads the way. The mighty Beetle booms up the hill. James Harrold leads the way. You've got the Super Retro Rallycross class for the over 1.6 litre cars. Retro Rallycross cars are under 1600cc, and there's also the 4-wheel drive and Group B class within the championship. Across the loose comes James Harrold then with Steve Cousins behind him, and then in 3rd place Jason Bowes, who has tried most things to unsettle Cousins and now goes for the inside line as they dive down towards Chestnut Drift. Ian Biaggi goes through. There is the Peugeot 309 of Chris Dawkins. And across the loose then now comes Steve Cousins. Now James Harrold I thought was going for a joker lap, which puzzled me a bit because there isn't a joker lap in Retro Rallycross. He comes back onto the circuit, so what he's done is go completely wide at Chessons Drift. He's rejoining. Can he stay in the top 4? You see Ian Biaggi come through. He didn't have a joker lap in period, so you don't have a joker lap in Retro Rallycross, but towards the joker lap line had gone James Harrold, so peeling off the road with a problem that he looks like he's cured, and there in the background he's back on the road in 3rd place. So Steve Cousins is going to come through to win the first semi-final. Jason Bowes will be 2nd, and there look, James Harrold is going to make it home despite that off-track excursion effectively in 3rd place. Paul Easterbrook's Toyota next home. Checkered flag is waved as Ian Biaggi, the man that leads the Retro Rallycross class in the championship, the man from Dumfries, much travelled for his rallycrossing, heads over the line, Chris Dawkins' Peugeot. So Steve Cousins wins semi-final 1 from Jason Bowes, James Harrold recovering for 3rd, and Paul Easterbrook the final qualifier. The 2nd semi-final. Metro 6R4 on pole position for Roger Thomas. Gary Dixon, Croft winner with the Vauxhall Astra Mark II alongside. More 4-wheel drive machinery next, Derek Job. Then the RS 200 of Steve Harris. Simon Hart's Mark I Escort. Mark Finch missing off the back of the grid, but look at the start the 4-wheel drive machinery makes, and a demon getaway by Steve Harris from the 2nd row of the grid. Contrast that with the Mark I Escort going back to the early 1970s in the hands of Simon Hart. So Roger Thomas leads the way then as they blast their way across the loose. This really does take you back with the RS200 up the inside line, and Steve Harris goes through. The ex-Mark Rennison car, British Championship winning RS200 with that huge rear wing on the back. He drove it at Silverstone in the Retro Rallycross demonstration runs at the World Rallycross event. He also drove it up the hill at Goodwood at the Festival of Speed. But now in race trim for the first time in many, many years, this car that Mark Rennison had great success with leads the pack as they come over the loose. It's Roger Thomas then running in second place with that Metro 6R4. He was a winner here back at the start of the season. But right now, the RS200 is showing the 6R4 the way. And then go back over a decade before the four-wheel drive cars came on the scene, and you get that Mark 1 Escort in the hands of Simon Hart, reminiscent of the Rod Chapman, John Taylor Escorts. Derek Jobs' four-wheel drive Escort there is under attack from Gary Dixon with the Vauxhall Astra. Gary Dixon, one of those in the Voxcare entered car out of the Super Retro Rallycross class. The man from Lincoln in that 2-litre Astra climbs the hill, went really well in the wet at Croft, and comes then now through the hairpinners. Up front, it's 6R4 chasing the RS200. Steve Harris across the loose. His two sons racing in the supercar and RX 150 classes. Now it's Dad's turn to get behind the wheel. Gary Dixon battles his way across the loose, staying with Derek Job here. It's a good idea to have this four-wheel drive class, because as the machinery gets older, where else does it go? It's not competitive against the modern-day supercars in the MSA British Rallycross Championship, so to have this class for the older four-wheel drive cars and give them a home still is becoming an increasingly good idea, as Gary Dixon humbles Derek Jobs forward. The two-wheel drive Astra up the inside line and goes through, understeers wide a little bit, but Gary Dixon is up and past him. Good move that. There is Simon Hart. And this is the race leader. This is Steve Harris, who is looking very, very quick indeed. He's on his last lap, and a race win is heading his way. When Group B cars were outlawed from rallying, Rallycross became the natural home for them. Grids absolutely boomed, and the RS200 was massively successful. Martin Skanka inevitably headed the Ford Charge, but back home, Mark Rennison did great things with this car within the British Championship. Runs the GB1 number still from when Mark Rennison had the car as British champion in the Rallycross Grand Prix at the end of the season, so it's completely period livery, added to which the 86 on the screen and on the doors the current competition number of the car. Steve Harris then will win semi-final 2, and he's going to win it by some margin. Roger Thomas with the 6R4 not even in shot as the checkered flag waves. There is the Metro. Roger Thomas comes through a somewhat distant second in this semi-final, but enough to qualify. Derek Jobs' Ford Escort up towards the line. He will come through now into paddock, turns through the right-hander, and you get the feeling that Derek Job may have had a problem here. That looks like a car that's getting to the finish rather than really being driven hard. So Derek Job makes it home, and there is Simon Hart's oh-so-smart Mark 1 Escort. And Simon Hart takes the checkered flag. His final race of the weekend is done. Steve Harris, Roger Thomas, Gary Dixon and Derek Job, the top 4. Simon Hart 5th. That non-starter, sadly, Mark Finch. We're ready for the final for the Retro Rallycross Brigade. Steve Cousins in the Citroën AX versus Steve Harris in the RS200 at the front, with Roger Thomas for company. Jason Bowes and James Harold on row 2. Gary Dixon, Derek Job and Paul Easterbrook on the back row of the grid. The lights go to green. The four-wheel drive machinery takes off. Everybody else fights for third place, and James Harold has it going onto the loose. Although Steve Cousins from pole, not the best of getaways, because he's dropped back into the pack and he's lost places. Steve Harris dominated his semi-final. He leads here as they come across the loose. Steve Cousins accelerates his way now down towards the Devil's Elbow, has a cheeky look at the inside of James Harold in the Beetle, and really he wants to be ahead of him. They are both in the Super Retro Rallycross category for the over 1600cc cars, and as they come through the hairpin, Roger Thomas, way offline in the 6R4, comes back across the road, a little bit close to the Beetle, but James Harold getting away from Steve Cousins in that Super National Championship winning Citroën AX behind him, the ex-Dan Rook car. 4 laps the final, 1 in the book. Across the loose comes James Harold, as there is Roger Thomas hard at work. Metro 6R4s that had huge success in Rallycross at the time with Will Gollop, and even in the 90s into the noughties were still doing a great job, with the likes of Lawrence Gibson still taking big successes. Paul Easterbrook is ahead of Gary Dixon, the Toyota of the ex-autocrosser, staying ahead of the Vauxhall Astra there. Steve Harris heading for a victory, it seems, because the way that he went in semi-final 2 suggests that nobody is going to get near him. Steve Cousins parked by the side of the road, look, going up towards the hairpin. Steve Cousins off the road, out of the race seemingly. There is James Harold, the Volkswagen Beetle, little trace of smoke maybe coming out of the back of the car, but that is the sorry sight of Steve Cousins going no further. And here is Roger Thomas, winner at Lyddon back on Easter Monday, but not a winner today unless Steve Harris hits problems, because he is just too far back. There is James Harold. There is still that trace of smoke from the Voltsport Beetle on the left rear, and it does seem to be mechanical more than tyre against bodywork. Oh so sideways is Roger Thomas. The Metro 6R4 can't catch the RS200 up the road, although look, it seems that a bonnet pin has gone for Steve Harris, and so on the left side of the car, the bonnet peeling away a little bit. That might just be obscuring vision, and the last thing he wants is for the air to get underneath it. However, Harris there, flapping bodywork or no, leads the way. Danger is that just parts company completely. Steve Harris, half a lap to run, comes down to the Devil's Elbow. It has been a very impressive performance in this car. It's great to see it back on track. It was a real head turner at Goodwood back in the summer. It also caught the attention at Silverstone when he drove it at the World Rallycross event in these retro Rallycross demo races that we had. James Harold still presses on in the Smoky Beetle, and he's fending off the Mark 1 Golf behind him in the hands of Jason Bowes. Steve Harris wins the retro Rallycross final here at Lyddon. The checkered flag is waved. Some way back, Roger Thomas second in the Metro 6R4. James Harold on target for third in the Volkswagen Beetle. Despite that smoke and almost a bit of flame becoming more prominent as well, James Harold gets to the end. And Paul Easterbrook still busy battling with Gary Dixon. Another little tussle set to be resolved just in favour of the Toyota. And James Harold, right at the very end, the fire did, I'm afraid, come to something. Marshalled quickly on the scene. Steve Harris wins the Retro Rallycross Championship final at Lyddon from Roger Thomas and James Harold. Jason Bowes taking fourth in the championships. Ian Biaggi heads the Retro Rallycross standings from Mark Finch and Simon Hart. In Super Retro Rallycross, it's James Harold ahead of Gary Dixon and Ray Morgan third. Next stop is Pembrey.